Hi, everybody. It's Martha Novak, and this is a show called Martha. What is it? Real Talk with Martha Novak. I could not remember my name for a moment. You know, I was thinking about this morning. I was so surprised because my husband said it was Father's Day. He got a call from his daughter from Austria, and it was like, oh my God, have I forgotten Father's Day? I've got to still look it up. I think this is Father's Day. Luckily, I have a present. But anyway, it isn't wrapped. And that's what I was thinking about. You caught me. How are you guys? I hope you're doing well. We are talking about what makes us happy through authenticity and being authentic. It's really honestly what all my shows are about, reaching your potential, because that's the only way to do it is through some degree of authenticity. And so we're going to continue with that subject today. I hope all of you all are doing well and staying healthy out there. Kind of a wacky time, isn't it? Amazing. At least on a radio show, I don't have to wear a mask. Although I do have a black poodle mask. Let's be fashionable. All right. Let's do a prayer. Get us all in the same place, particularly me, apparently. And we will begin. Dear God, who is all there is, you who are all we are, and all everything is in this world, we thank you so much for our being here, entirely here today. As we open to hearing, seeing, sensing, and knowing what you would have us do as the next step in our lives, or even the next few steps. We ask that we don't look too far ahead, that we get overwhelmed, but that we are keen and motivated to take the next step, inspired by you, dear God, on the highest level of us. We now ask that we give up knowing anything, for it is the you through us that know it all. And we open ourselves to this and say thank you so much, and so it is. Ladies and gentlemen, I don't know whether my husband has had time to fix the tweak on Facebook Live. We had a problem last week because you all were writing me. I got the messages after the show, but I didn't get the messages during the show like I'm supposed to on Facebook Live. I have a feeling today is going to be the same way because I don't see good morning. So I say good morning, all of you all. You dear faithful listeners like Kat and Lisa and all the rest of you, Mark as well. And thank you so much for being with me today. We'll definitely try to have this fixed by next week. We're making a lot of technical changes, and we have gone with this satellite company, and nobody told us to cut off all our devices. So we used up our data in like 4 days, right? So it's been quite the thing to try to, do what we are supposed to do to save data and use it for business, and what we're supposed to do. Thanks for being patient with us. So we're talking about being happy. And happiness, there's a wannabe happiness, and there's really true happiness that is definitely rooted in a peace and knowing you're not alone. So we're talking about that kind of happiness today, not the wannabe happiness. I've been wannabe happy for a long, long time. I remember certain instances happening in my life that told me I wasn't really happy, but yet I didn't know what to do about it until I did, which was starting on some degree of this work. I remember one man in particular. I don't know whether he's still with us, but he was such a dear person. He was rather a mentor to me, a real hero in the theater. And he walked me out to my car one night. after I had done a show. Musical theater was my forte, and I had just starred in the show, and it was a nice success. And he walked me out to the car, and in the half dark, he said to me, "Why are you so happy?" And I felt like he could see all the way to the back of my head. And I wasn't that happy. But I didn't know what to do about it, or what. This was still when I was quite unaware and just didn't have a clue. It was interesting because a number of, I don't know whether it was a number of years or shortly during that year, I really can't remember, but I had a dream. A dream can be so powerful, it really does propel you into new thought, into new action. And the dream told me to go to a doctor to get the rest of this out. I didn't know what the rest of this was. I didn't even know what I was doing. But I asked a few friends of mine if they knew any psychologists. That's the only place I knew to start. And I found a name, and I went to her for about 6 months, and it wasn't enough. And I found someone else and someone else. And then all of a sudden, this system started. And it was a way to heal myself and others. So we are given these things because we're open to receiving these things. Be sure you're open to receiving them. And then your life changes and it gets so much better. So here we are talking about this. All right, we are on number 28. I do encourage you to go back and listen to other radio shows because they've all been about some pretty exciting things. You know what that excitement is? Your life and its potential. It's very exciting. So everybody's here for a reason. We're all doing something that we should until we're doing something else that we should. So here we go. You ready? We have to be willing to move mentally, emotionally, physically, and spiritually. What do I mean by that? We have to be willing to think new thoughts, to feel new feelings, to do physical things in a different manner or do them differently in some way. And energetically, we will be changing. One of the things I've said to you all in the past is that we have 4 bodies: the mental, emotional, physical, and spiritual. Okay, we'll all agree with that. The spiritual is the energetic body. It's the body that leaves the physical, but it's really all the bodies, you know? We're all energy, and that's why we can take off from ourselves when our physical death comes. In the process of waking up, in the process of consciousness deepening, and a real surrender and awakening comes, where you finally get your spiritual being in physical form and not the other way around. Something happens in this process. Right now, most human beings, in fact, all human beings walking around, have more energy in the emotional body than they should. What should be there? Awe, compassion, unconditional love, incredible gratitude, joy. You know, these things exist by their very nature, and a few more, by the way, exist by their very nature in the emotional body. I think of it like a garden, and you plant these beautiful things that you want to grow there. And as a matter of fact, some of them are there by the nature of the body itself, by the nature of the garden. But weeds come in. Seeds float in, are dropped by birds, and things spring up there that you don't want growing there. This happens in our childhoods. It just does. We can have the best parents in the world, or we can have the shoddiest parents in the world, and it doesn't seem to matter. We all have these issues, like weeds in the garden, that at one point in our evolvement, we go, do I really want to believe that anymore? Is that really true for me? Well, sometimes we hang on to it because we don't know what's true for me. And I say that's where we've got to find out what is true for you. You have to go through this process of finding out who you are, apart from mother and apart from father and apart from fantasy mother and apart from fantasy father and apart from fantasy us and apart from fantasy family and apart from fantasy God. Because we fantasize all those things as kids. Now, as we work on resolving and releasing issues, guess what happens? The energy lightens in our emotional body. Well, do you guess where that energy goes? It goes in the spiritual body. And this is why we awaken spiritually. We finally get it. Everybody gets the same thing when they awaken spiritually. Isn't that the oddest thing, that everybody awakens? I mean, we're all going to be individuals and we all do the same thing, but we all know certain things, like God is always with us. We're never alone. We never have been alone, and that life has been perfect. It's been the perfect system. We're so grateful for everything, even the people that gave us trouble. Yeah. And it all fits together in some sort of perfect whole. And that's spiritual surrender at its highest form, where we'll never be different. We'll never be the same again. We're going to be different, even though everything may look the same. And it does. But it's really different on the inside. Those of us that have had this experience in some way do want to talk about it. We do want to share it with you because life is easier. All right. So we have to, going back to this point, number 28, we have to move mentally, emotionally, physically, and spiritually. We have to start understanding different things. The life that you are going to open to, if you haven't already, and you may have already, is a global one. In other words, you understand things globally. It isn't just the person at the next desk who's hateful and you don't like them and has terrible ideas. No, it is that person is a part of God, just like you are. We're all the aspect of God known as us. And there's a reason for that person being there, and there's a reason for you reacting the way you do. Many times, they remind you of a family member, or they remind you of yourself. Something to look at. Everything is something to look at. To make you better. Not to beat yourself up. You know, a lot of times, you've got to understand that a lot of times people use all work. They use everything to beat themselves up. Well, when I see somebody doing that in this work, I stop them, because this isn't about beating you up. This is about, seizing your potential, moving, going on. And that brings me to an important point. Twice this week, somebody has called somebody else in their families lazy. I want to address that word because I don't like that word. It has absolutely no meaning for me. Here's why. Nobody's lazy. Does that surprise you? Nobody is lazy. There's no such word. You use that word to describe yourself or others because they are not going in the direction you want them to. You see, we're energetic beings, and we're all moving or not moving energetically. We may be moving that way instead of this way. And when we see somebody moving that way instead of this way, and we want them to go this way, we call them lazy. Not knowing why they're acting the way they do and why their energy is going that way. Now, that's what we do in this company, is we find out the emotional reasons and resolve them why you're going that way instead of that way, if this is the way you truly want to go, right? That's what it is. So nobody's lazy. People are doing different things with their energy. They're motivated by different things. They have a different world in their heads than you do. And it's propelling their energy in a certain direction. And that's it. So when we get on our high horse and call anybody lazy, we've got to look at our judgment, our unseeing. And we've got to open our minds to what they may be doing, which is compassion, right? We also have never learned, in many cases, to make an effort on our behalf. I have a funny story for you. So my parents passed away, and I'm cleaning out their house, right? And one of the things I find is a little baby book of mine. I think, if I'm not mistaken, it was called The Littlest Angel. And, and I sat down. I thought, oh, well, this would be an interesting thing to read, right? And it's all about this angel that gets left behind by the big angels, a little baby angel, apparently. And it gives everything away of its heavenly possessions, its sandals, its, I can't even remember now, its harp, its halo, right? To other people that she meets along the way that may need it, right? And she's left with nothing. And then she comes to a house, and she sees two people crying inside, and they want a child, if I'm remembering this correctly. It was interesting because I read it and I was kind of horrified. There were so many unexplained things in there, and that would confuse a child's mind. And I realized that this little book, not solely, but this little book, while it was trying to teach you to be generous, was teaching you to self-sacrifice, which is an issue. You don't want to self-sacrifice. And that brings me to where we are right now. You've got to make an effort in your behalf. Nobody's going to come along and do this for you. A lot of people actually think, oh, if I can just get a partner, my life will be fine. It'll be just, once upon a time in a land far, far away, and then it ends with, and they lived happily ever after. Guys, the reason they ended the fairy stories there is that's when it gets complicated. That's when you're inventing a new model of love, and you got to work through the problems. This isn't about somebody coming along and fixing everything. This is about you stepping up and doing what you need to do for you now. Acting in your own behalf. Someone isn't there to do it for you. And if they are, it's called enabling. And that whole thing has got to stop. The interesting thing that I've noticed for years, too, is when you have an enabling situation, the enabler and the enablee, right? You start pulling yourself back so you're not enabling anymore, and the enablee gets very angry. Not once have I ever heard that person say to any of my clients, thank you so much for all the years you've given me. This is great. And now I really need to do it on my own. Oh, no, that's not going to happen. So that doesn't mean that you can't fix this. Everything can be fixed. And everything should be fixed. It's the natural involvement of your family, of you, of your world, of your friendships, of your business, and of your potential. Many, many people, of course, are afraid of conflict and very much afraid of what the response to anything will be back, whether it's enabling or something else. And I'm saying to you here, that is something that must be addressed. We can't go through life being people pleasers and self-sacrificing that way and get anywhere and be fulfilled and know anything. We have to wake up. We have to be able to handle conflict. I did an exercise with my friends yesterday. I'm going to put this exercise on the table for you. Name something that you're worried about. Name some sort of conflict. Put that at the top of the page. That's question number 1. Question number 2 is, now tell me all the terrible things that could go south about that. I'm going to hurry along because this is a radio show and nobody likes empty space on the radio, right? And I want you to go back and do this exercise. Number 3, that probably is not going to happen. And at most times when our minds go down this bunny trail of, oh my God, it's going to be terrible. I can't, tell the truth here, not my truth. Tell the truth here. It doesn't happen. So, assuming it's not going to happen now, let's write what's going to really happen here. And then number 4 question is, what mind were you in to make number 3 happen? Were you in the ego child's mind or the highest self mind? What this exercise does, and what this exercise did for my group yesterday, was they said, I can always turn it to everyone's advantage if I can just be in the highest self. If I can just be in that love-centered part of my brain, whatever I have to say, even if it's a conflict situation, I can say in great love. And we can work something out. That's what usually happens. And I offer you that as something that can happen to you. I hope so. Okay. To this that we're talking about, there comes a time, and everybody's evolving, and I'm on number 29, if you're counting. There comes a time, and everybody's waking up, that you realize that you are the one worth making an effort for. No one else is going to do it. It is all you. This has several ramifications. I know I've watched people for years, and it certainly happened to me, where we go, wait a minute, I've got to do this. Another thing that happens that's related is you wake up to what you have to give. You uniquely have to give. I mean, all of us do similar things. I mean, some of us are salesmen. Some of us do what I'm doing. Some of us write. Some of us, go to an office every day and do marketing. Some of us do all sorts of things. That said, what makes you unique? Why should anybody listen to you or me? What makes us unique? Well, it is so much that you can't even list. But if you haven't thought that through, you really don't know your competitive advantage. Because let's take sales, for example. Do you realize nobody's buying the product? They're buying your confidence in that product. Who you are. The confidence they have that you, if something goes wrong with that product, will get on the line with them and fix it. Now, I'm talking about small potatoes here, of course. I'm not talking about mega corporations. But if in a mega corporation, and this is one of the things I do, is I go into mega corporations and I make sure that everybody feels the personal touch there because it's lost. We can't lose that, guys. Have you noticed in the grocery store right now, with everybody wearing a mask, not a whole lot of people are smiling at each other. Everybody's just going into the grocery store or doing whatever they do, and they're just picking up whatever they're picking up and going. I was so thrilled the other day by this man. And there was this cute man, he had a great big old mask on. His eyes were twinkling. And he smiled at me and he said, "There's a smile under here." And I said, "I know. I could see it. I can see it up here." It was very, very sweet and dear. We can't lose that connection, you see. By the way, some people don't have it to begin with. Now, how do you do that? Do you just go about pleasing people? No. You've got to find who you are. Because what you have to give, you uniquely have to give, is that smile that we can't see but shows anyway. It is that kindness. It is that confidence. It is that whatever you are. I think at some point in all of our lives, we wake up and go, "I'm the only one that can do it, and who the hell am I, and what do I have to bring to anything?" And you find out when you're on this path. Some of these things are buried deep down. You know, I've said all along, it's a gyre, this working through this evolvement as a human being. And some things that are in us that we have to give are buried down there. And when you start unearthing deeper levels of God in you, deeper levels of consciousness in you, guess what starts coming forth? It starts coming forth pretty mightily. You can look for it, but that's not the reason that you should start the journey. It's just one of those wonderful perks along the way. And sometimes it's more than a perk. Sometimes it's life-changing. Number 30, emotion is part of this. You see, if we're talking about the way you learn and the way you communicate as a human being, we're talking about a learning and communication style. I've done a lot of research on this in my life. We even have a test to define yours and all that. But to say that you are a mixture of your brain, your mental capacity, your emotions, and your physical body, they are all three incredible learning experiences. It's how you learn and how you communicate. You can't sell me anything if it doesn't make mental sense to me. But right on top of that, you better have a lot of confidence and emotion and excitement connected to it. I'll probably buy it. Then if I have to do anything physically to do it, I will. Some of you are more physically oriented. So if I was going to sell you a tractor, I'd get you out on that tractor and then answer your questions, you see, because that would appeal to you. If you are an emotional person, somebody that I would appeal emotionally first, and then whatever you're second, I'd hit second and third. It's a demographic, if you will, our learning and communication style. Now, that said, most of us are not at odds mentally with what we think or ideas. We're not at odds with our physical bodies. Sometimes we are. I mean, I'd like to lose a little weight. But that's not being at odds. That's just something that's on my agenda to do. But many people don't understand emotion. Many people are afraid of emotion. I had a client yesterday, day before yesterday, whose family was so highly emotional that how she dealt with it was to turn off her emotion. Non-emotive. Okay. Often misunderstood for being non-emotive, but all she was doing back then was protecting herself. The problem is she's still doing it. Now, that's just a tiny example. There can be a lot of reasons. I came from a family that while we had emotion, we didn't show it very often. You were taught to be, to think through things. I'm very grateful for that. Really, I am. But I, too, especially as an actor and as a writer, I had to make sure that my emotional experience was fluid. This is what we mean by emotional intelligence. Emotion is in two parts. Number one, you feel something. Many people do that. Most people do that to more or less degrees. But there's a second part, and that is expressing what you feel. That's the rub that most people have. They may feel it, they don't express it. How do you express it? Well, there are many, many ways. Through the arts, certainly, writing notes, talking to people, being able to talk like we talk every Sunday morning about all sorts of hard things, right? But there are people that don't do that don't do anything. I have a dear friend right now who's struggling, and she doesn't do anything creative at all. She never has, never will. She sits in her house and worries about the future. That's how she deals with things. She's completely cut off her feeling aspect, and she wants to go down there more deeply, and I'm all for that, but that's not a switch we switch on. That's someone who must start taking steps in that direction. You see? Finding her expression of herself. Everything really is an expression of self, isn't it? I mean, all our dialogue is, everything. So we have to be willing and flexible. And I wish you all could see what I'm seeing right now. There's a little birdseed house outside that's open. It's like a little gazebo that we hang up, and there's no birdseed in it because our birdseed is upstairs, right, on another porch. But the cutest little squirrels just jumped in that and just swung around. It was very fun to watch. And my husband saw a baby bear yesterday by the side of the road. He said he was so glad I wasn't with him because I would just be going nuts. I'd be just talking about that today and nothing else, you see. So, when I talk about that we have to have a healthy emotional body and experience emotionally, I'm not talking about being overly emotional. I want to get that straight right away. It is not about high emotionality. High emotionality is usually a disorder. It's called the histrionic personality disorder. This is somebody who looks very emotional. But the irony is, this is somebody that spins around emotionally. So almost it's scary and off-putting. And it's there so they don't have to go down more deeply, and it keeps you away from making them feel something they don't want to feel. So histrionics are more shallow. Usually when this work starts, people are more emotional or completely shut down before they start opening up. And when they start opening up, they find that they don't get as emotional overtly, but they feel and they have an expression for feeling, and life is pretty darn good. As a first step, I recommend highly that you learn how to call emotion by name. Pretty easy to do that, and that is get on the internet and look for lists of emotions. Find long lists. There's some short ones and there's some long ones. I want you to know that there are really only two categories of emotions. One is love-based emotion, and one is fear-based emotion. It's not as easy, though, as saying, well, this is a fear-based emotion, this is a love-based emotion, and doing it that way. Because an emotion can be used by the ego child's mind very I'm Idris, I am so glad that you called in. Let me ask you to call me on, um, if you would like to talk with me today, on Blog Talk Radio. And this goes for everybody. I forgot to announce this, but the guest call-in number is 347-850-1647. That is 347-850-1647. I can accept calls over Blog Talk Radio, but I cannot accept calls during the show on Facebook Live because it throws my show out. Okay? Thank you so much for understanding. So if you'd like to talk with me, and I'd love to talk with you, then please do call on the 347-850-1647 line. So you need to call emotion by name. So if you look at emotion sheets online, and again, the same emotion can be motivated by the egoic child's mind very selfishly and self-indulgently, or it can certainly be a product of the highest self. I'm going to just give you an example. Let's take grief, for example. Let's say you lose someone. And that's a horrible thing. And all of us as human beings certainly go through that. But what I'm wanting you to understand is the ego child's mind is going to possibly, if it is the inclination, get very dramatic about it, have it go on too long, milk everybody's pity. That's the ego child's mind dealing with grief, right? Highest self deals with grief in a very mature and personal way. Might get some help through a therapist, might not, might handle it oneself, might know that one day you get up and you feel better and the next day you cry in the shower again, and you are patient with yourself. Emotion is just not black and white like that. So as you're working with your list, it's a question of, the first question to ask is, what do I feel? What of these emotions do I feel right now? And label them. How wonderful. Good for you to do that. And the second thing here is, now, is it which mind is it motivated from? What am I doing with this? Now, usually, if you're like most people, and if you're like most of my clients, you're motivated by the highest self and the ego child's mind. My job, and anybody like me, is charged with trying to diminish and finally go dormant the ego child's mind motives, just so that you can really be in the pure energies. You see? Good. All right. We've got to also learn to deal with emotion in a very mature and resolvable way. In my opinion, and this is true when I work with people, particularly in business, no is never no. A mistake is never a mistake that you should go and, hide your head in a hole for. There are things to learn from all of these things. There are even ways to redo and to experience in a different way. I'll tell you a story. I've said this a story before, but it's a good story. I had a client who was a logistics person. She was a really good logistics person, and she was in logistics when that was not a field for women. Okay, so this was a hard business. She was responsible for getting products to big stores, right, from the warehouses to the big stores, or to the manufacturer in the big stores, so that you could buy them. And she partnered with an organization that she didn't know. And they were delivering product to this was the biggest deal any of them had ever had. and the partners totally messed it up. Now, she was not culpable because she didn't watch those people. She didn't know them. She took them at face value, right? They completely screwed it up. So everything went south. And the person that was in charge of um, the person who was in charge of the big company that they were supposed to deliver to, right, was furious. And she heard that this man was talking behind her back and really sullying her reputation. So she came to me and she said, I'm going to have to get out of the business. My life is ruined. My reputation gone. You know the story, right? So I said, well, let's do something else. Why don't we write a letter to him and send him the biggest gift basket you can find? And you're going to write a sweet letter to him. And she said, why would I do that? And I said, because it's going to be the truth. And we've got to get you into believing this, because if you're doing it for selfish motives or you don't want to do it at all, it's not going to work. But you're very good at what you do. So let's go on and apologize and put things on the table. So the letter went something like this. I mean, I had dictated it off the top of my head, so I'm still not remembering after so many years, and it's been a lot of years. But it was something to the effect of, dear whatever, thank you so much for the hardest lesson I've ever learned in my life. I am absolutely deeply hurt by how all of this went down, as I know you are. I am enormously disappointed. And I want you to know that while all of that is true, I have never learned more about this business and my place in it than I have through you and through this horrible experience. I want you to accept this gift basket with my utmost gratitude. And I'm going to take every single mistake and make them lessons and apply them to everything I do from now on, and hopefully be much better at what I do because of you and because of all this. And I thank you so much and wish you well always. Well, he called her the moment he read that letter, and she started working for him. So, guys, no is never no. It's just not. Now, sometimes no is no, but there are extenuating circumstances. There's a highest self in you that needs to deal with all situations. And just like that exercise might prove to you that I gave you earlier, the results are much better when you come from your highest self. If you come from the ego child's mind, you did something wrong, you're a kid, you feel bad about it, you should have known better, you're beating yourself up all the time, you're afraid of getting in trouble. That's not somebody that I or this person or anybody else is going to give big money to. It's the truth. You can't be the kid anymore. So, this is about conquering your emotions as well. This is about saying, I feel these things. She felt all those things I'm telling you about. Terrific guilt. She was ready to throw her career, her life work away out of disappointment with herself. But it wasn't necessary to do so. What was necessary was that she had to rise above all that little kid stuff and be an adult, and a loving one at that, and a grateful one. That's where it works for her, and that's where it works for you. Works for us all there. So that's working with emotion in a mature and resolvable way, you see? Now, she didn't do that, by the way, to get that company back. She did that because we got her to a place where it was the right thing to do. You keep in mind that the ego child's mind is always going to do things for very selfish and self-indulgent reasons. Higher self does it because it's the right thing to do. It's the right thing to do. Okay. The last thing I want to say about emotion is that we're all terrified of emotion until you learn and really understand that emotion, feeling something, is just a signpost that says, you're feeling this, look a little deeper. That's what anxiety is for. Here's a signpost, look a little deeper. I have a client who is just doing beautifully in her life, but she has dealt with anxiety her whole life. So every time she's anxious these days, she used to be anxious like 24/7, right? Every day of her life, I was worried about her living long because, good Lord, have mercy. She expended so much energy with anxiety, worrying all the time. And what we did was finally clear enough of that out so that she was sleeping, she was feeling great, life is great. Once in a while, it peaks. Then we have to go back for 24 to 36 hours and say, all right, what were the things that you diminished as problems that were more problematic than that? And we can always find that. Well, I'm worried about this. Well, there you are. That's what you did. You never resolved that. And then this came along. And that wasn't resolved either. That was added too. And then this came along. And that was added too. And none of these things were ever dealt with. And here comes your anxiety, because that's not a normal way to live. Do you understand? You need to learn how. First of all, you honestly need to learn what bothers you. See, what she was saying to herself, and I don't know whether you do this or somebody else does, or you do something else, but she was saying, oh yeah, that bothers me, but that shouldn't bother me. Oh, the great shoulds, right? Oh, not these. The shoulds in this way are not real healthy. That shouldn't bother me. Therefore, it bothered her, and she never considered herself and dealt with it, because that shouldn't bother me. What a unloving, unhealthy pronouncement on a situation. Okay. Whatever you're saying to yourself, the bottom line here is it's a signpost, and it's telling you to look at something, and you'd be better off if you did. That's all. Okay. Let's go to one of my most unfavorite words when used by the ego child's mind, and that is the word should. Should takes choice, which is a God-given, wonderful gift. Shoulds take choice right off the table. You should go to the gym, but you don't feel good today. You would rather rest or feed your mind or feed your heart in some way. And yet, you should. It's another way we don't consider ourselves and what we deeply want and what would enhance our lives. Some things we just do, I don't know, there's a magic around it. I've told you the story before about my girlfriend who was coming over. We made the date on a Monday, and when Saturday rolled around and she rang my doorbell and I opened the door, I saw somebody as tired as me. We had made this date to go shopping, right? Oh my God, I looked at her. She didn't want to disappoint me. I didn't want to disappoint her by canceling. Neither one of us felt like this. So I said, come on in, let's figure out what we want to do, because I looked at her right away and it was like, holy Moses, you look like me. And she said, yeah, I didn't want to call and cancel and disappoint you, but I feel, ugh. I said, well, I feel the same way. So we sat down and I said, let's just take a few minutes to get in touch with what we want and meditate. And for some reason, I knew first. What popped into my head was I wanted to go to Whole Foods and get a pint of ice cream, and I wanted to eat it all myself. The healthiest ice cream I can find, but something I really wanted. And I didn't want to share it with her. And she looked at me and she kind of had a light bulb over her head and she said, I think I'd like that too. I'm going to get my own. And I said, that's just great. So we went to Whole Foods. We each picked out a little pint of ice cream and we came home and we got our big spoons out and we sat there talking and eating it. And I can't tell you what happened after that. All of a sudden, we wanted to go shopping. All of a sudden, we were fine. Now, Spirit is never going to tell you to go buy a Porsche. It's going to tell you what you need: a bath, a shower, cancellation, or going to the party, going to buy a pint of ice cream. It's going to be something that on some, almost to me, magical level, is exactly what your being needed. Now, I urge you to listen to yourself that well, because God's right there and we're not listening. If we are the aspect known as God, we know everything. I will say we do know everything. I'll say this over and over and over again. We know everything. Unless the information is being kept from us, and sometimes it is, we know everything. We know what we need. So listen, go down there and get it. Don't get so busy with your life on the surface that we don't know. Well, that's interesting. I don't know what that's about, but we're going to say thank you very much. Okay. So let's keep going here. I think when we use the word should, we're like our own prison wardens in a way. I don't think that's going to help us. We also, at one point in our process, or at several points in our process, we need to analyze our rules and standards for ourselves. Because believe it or not, all of this is in your head. It's in your head. There's no perfection except the perfection of God. The rest of us are all imperfect. We are imperfect. Let's accept that. But we're so busy running around trying to be perfect. We're going to be talking about this in more detail in another radio show. But there's just no reason to try for perfection. You want to do a good job. You want to be the best you can be. You want to look the best you can, given no haircuts. You want to have a good work ethic. You want to be sincere of heart. You do the best you can, right? Rules and standards. It was real cute when I first married my husband. My husband has a lot of rules and standards. I wouldn't necessarily call him OCD, but he's got a lot of rules and standards. And what's funny about it is he says, I do. When what's real funny, and he really realizes it now after all these years, but he goes, yeah, you don't have any rules and standards. That's what's annoying me. That he thinks he's the great enforcer. I think it's really funny, and we find a way to work with that. I'm teasing him all the time about it, and he goes, "Oh, no rules and standards." It's pretty funny. But you need to look at your rules and standards and realize how important are they. Most of the time, not very, except in our own mind. I mean, for example, if you don't cook Christmas dinner for the family and knock yourself out this year, what does that mean? about you. See, there's going to always be, under your rules and standards that have to go, you're going to have a self-attack. If you don't do this, what? If I don't go to the gym, I'm a fat slob. It just means I'm not going to go to the gym that day. You remember what I've taught you all before about primary emotion and secondary emotion, right? Primary emotion is, I don't feel like going to the gym today. Not going to go. Secondary emotion is, oh, I'm a fat slob. I can't believe I do this all the time. I hate the gym. What is wrong with me? Secondary emotion is ruining your life. Secondary emotion has to go. Stick with the primary. The fact is, there's the gym. You don't want to go. Ain't going to go today. There it is. That's it. Okay. Moving right along. I don't think we can ever really know ourselves at all until you find out that little person below the rules and standards. So I can't emphasize enough that I'd look at that if I were you. I'd challenge them. You know, by the way, if something is OCD, if you have a lot of anxiety, changing it. I change things up from time to time just to prove I can do it. Dress differently in the morning. Have a different routine of putting yourself together. Why not? Why not? Why not do things completely differently? See how much anxiety comes up for you. That's something to address if anxiety comes up. You know, life's a reinvention. Life's an improvisation. That energy has got to be free like that. Challenge your stuck energy. Wow. I got tickled too about a man who taught me this. He's a client, and he's still a client, and I just love him so much. But one day, a long time ago, he came in, he was mad at his wife, and he said, I should have a wife that supports me. And he was adamant about it, and I remember he put his hand down on the table like that. And he had the funniest look on his face after he said that. And then he looked up at me and he said, oh, because I had been talking to him, I guess I ought to set this up, that he was OCD, right? And he looked at me and he went, oh, it's the goddamn it after that statement that makes me OCD. I love my clients. My clients are the best. I love it because they say they have these revelations from time to time, right? It's really good. So yes, it's the goddamn it afterwards that makes it OCD. Now, of course, I'm diminishing this. There are a lot of reasons that we are OCD. I am not saying that you shouldn't be. I'm saying there are reasons for it, and we should get to them so we can diminish it for you. Okay? That is what I'm saying. I think that's a good thing to unravel. All right. Number 32. I think a real spiritual thing to do when we're in this process is to try to claim innocence and not knowing. And thirdly, being very tolerant of not knowing. People as human beings are not tolerant about not knowing things. Look at all the pundits. What did I read yesterday? Trump made this decision and this, and speculation about what that could mean. All the speculation that you hear on the news, that's, by the way, passing for news, is speculation. Nobody knows how anything's going to look, by the way. Nobody knows what one move anywhere, what the ramifications are. Nobody knows. Which ought to tell you to get comfortable with not knowing. All of us. Get comfortable with not knowing anything, whatever we are. And I think that we can go a step further, and that is to declare that we're not naive. No, we're not naive, not at this age. But that you can be innocent, that you can let the best thing happen in this and every moment. that there is going to be something that is a great gift in this moment, in every moment. I don't know why, but I'm being led right now into telling you something that I put on the table for my advanced class yesterday, and I think I'll share it with you. This is a little off the subject, but it has to do with how precious the moment is. I think it's really important for you to be entirely present in this moment. Entirely present. You can ask yourself, would I rather be somewhere else than right here? And if you would, then go do that for all of us. Because this moment requires that you be entirely here. If you've got somebody sitting in front of you, you talk to them. It requires your full attention. And if I find myself not enjoying this moment, then I'm going to go do something else that I am going to enjoy, because you're in charge of those moments. And we must be entirely present each moment. And this is how to be a full participant in your life. You see? Tuning in to that literal moment. So that's a sister to what I'm saying right now in terms of pull up your innocence. Pull up. Anything can happen here. Now that worries a lot of people. Anything can happen here. Dear God, I want to control everything because I don't want anything to happen to me unless I can get a guarantee from God. Do you hear how young and scared that sounds? That's something we should work on if you feel that that's happening in your life. Because we ought to say, I don't know. Why isn't I don't know a lovely phrase? I don't know. Let's find out. I don't know. Oh, it's an interesting time to live, ladies and gentlemen. Just so interesting to watch the world go by and not have to know. Just take it as it comes. Okay, so I combined 32 and 33, learn to tolerate uncertainty. The rest of your life is going to be this uncertain in the world situation. It just is. I think it's going to go on long past our lives. So we might as well enjoy ourselves now, right? All right. 35. I've seen a lot of people, particularly this week, that are beating themselves up. And beating yourself up stops the energy because it's what you've done in the past. It's not of the present. It's not right now. And if you are tuning into that wonderful moment of now that we talked about, that you would rather be here and do this than anything else in your life right now, which means that you're totally present, it wouldn't be in beating yourself up. You would never choose that, but you're choosing it in your unconscious state. You're going right back into your childhood and doing what you've always done, beating yourself up. And it, like right now, as I'm telling you these things, part of my listening audience is going, woohoo, wow, I can really use that this week. And part of my listening audience is going, oh, I can't believe I do that. Those are the ones that need more work, huh? Can you hear it? Because you're going back in the past. You're beating yourself up. Oh, why didn't I know that? Oh, I didn't know that at one time. I forgot that. Oh, that's going to be terrible. I don't know whether I'll ever get out of that one. Everybody else gets out of it, not me. Guys, no. None of those things are true. They're all blatant lies. The only thing that's really true is that you're a wealth of potential. You're a wealth of resource that you probably are not using fully. And we're waiting for you. The world is. And whatever you have to give. And whatever you're going to be adding to. Okay. we are um, going to say um, that this is a learning experience. So whenever you're presented with new information, for example, like I'm talking to you about today, you have a choice in that. You can either go back and beat yourself up and vilify yourself for not doing it when you probably didn't know it to begin with or forgot it. Or you can say, woo, I know now. Woo! I remember as a youngster being in a very early acting class, years and years and years and years ago. And I had a very hard thing to do. I think this would have stymied most people when I look back on it. And it was a marvelous learning experience for me. And I did it the best I knew how in my scene study class. And my teacher showed me what was really happening in the scene. And afterwards, I did my ego thing and went, why didn't I see that myself? Oh my God. It's self-attack. What I was saying is, how can I be so stupid? I'm always stupid. Self-attack. That's what you're always saying. And she looked at me and she said, well, you'll never forget it now, will you? One of the smartest lessons I ever had. Because all of a sudden I realized, no, I'll never forget that lesson. And I didn't. And I say that to you, and I say that to people that are sitting in front of me going, oh, why didn't I? And it just stops us all from going down that bunny trail, because we will never forget it now. Okay? All right. One of the things, too, concerning beating yourself up is when you beat yourself up, you're just taking an old door instead of evaluating yourself and your motivations objectively. And we have to learn to see ourselves in reality. I think that we have fantasies over ourselves. Now, I'm going to tell you something that I feel very strongly. I have never, in all my years of working on people, never once ever seen anybody that doesn't have a fantasy everything. There's the real father, there's the real mother, there's the fantasy father, the fantasy mother, there's you in reality, there's the fantasy you, there's the fantasy family, there's the fantasy God, there we are. It's just the way it is. My work for you is not complete until I address not only the reality of your situation, but the fantasy situation. And I have to be very careful in my language when I'm asking God to heal this or that, because it's all about directing the energy to the proper channel. Is it fantasy? Is it reality? Is it a combination of the two? And all of our reality is myth. You do know that, don't you? It's all myth. It's just the way we needed to perceive it for our growth and our learning experience. We can all say we remember or don't remember, but who's to say it was real? And who's to say anybody in the world saw it like you? They didn't. Right now, I'm looking at a real pretty scene off my porch. But if you were here with me, we'd all be looking at it and we'd all perceive something different, because that's the way life should be. This is the wonderful diversity of God. We all see things differently. Why isn't that all right? Certainly is. But we must be aware of what we're perceiving, and we're not. We just perceive it. And we never think about it. And that's the mistake. And that's where we need to wake up. Because that's where consciousness starts, in our waking up. Okay. One quick note about what I've just said about beating yourself up. And I think this is important to say. It's drama. It's drama. It's that histrionic thing that we do. That's not serving you. It's protecting a soft core on the inside of you, but it is not in any way serving you. It did when you were young, or you thought so. You see, when you're little, your mom and dad and maybe brothers and sisters or whoever were your mix seemed like a force to a little kid. They're force. That's how you confuse mom and dad with God at a certain age, because they're a force. Now, and what kids do when they're unhappy enough is they create themselves to be a force as well. What do you think OCD is? Your parents are screaming at each other, or screaming at you, or screaming and beating your brother in the other room. You clean the kitchen. You are a force of control, keeping it together. You see? We do it all sorts of ways. Drama is another way. We become the force when we become very histrionic and dramatic and everything. We're forced to. All right? But these things are wannabes. You don't want to be a force. You're listening to this show because you would like to sincerely be the aspect of God you are. That's a personal authority that's wonderful, but it's not force. It's not drama. It's not control. It's just being who you are. We are now to 36. Ladies and gentlemen, you need to examine your family. You really do. You need to look at everybody realistically. It's so interesting how many people try to protect their mothers and fathers still. They'll say something to me like, oh yeah, he beat the hell out of me, but he had a real good reason. He was, this is what was going on in his life. What? You have to deal with what happened, kids. You don't need to make excuses for anybody. Everybody has a reason. Everybody has a backstory. That's great. But nobody's advocating for the little kid that got the beating. And that kid needs to be advocated for now by you so we can heal. So it becomes really important to look at who your family was, what they struggled with, what their philosophies were, said, by the way, and unsaid in the family, what they believed about God and about life. I mean, did they believe that life was a struggle? If so, then you've got an element of that probably in your energy, that life is a struggle. And you're probably seeing evidence of that. When things are, like some of the things I've just named, repeated, when that happens every single day, when it's a repetition, we get it. Problem is sometimes we get it without words. Isn't that insidious? And we believe it, and yet doesn't have any words, so we can't get to it until we start something like this. And then I say, well, what was the philosophy there? What were the songs you sung, that were sung to you and that you sang in your family? What were the stories that were told? What was your favorite story when you were a kid? It says a lot about how you're living your life now. We need to find what those things are. What were your nicknames? What were the books you read? What were your favorite heroes and monsters, and why? I always have been terrifically interested in anything anybody could tell me about me. I love the personality tests that are out there. I, I, I love looking back at old things like that book I told you about and going, oh my God, that's why I did what I did. That's why I had that philosophy for a long time until I got rid of it, you know? But if you don't look at those things, you don't know where they came from. Sometimes we inherit these beliefs from our family. I remember my dad's favorite line, all the world. He would give you a present, and then he would say, with ownership comes responsibility. So I would take a nice doll he gave me, and instead of playing with it, I'd pack it away. Right? Couldn't mess that up, because with ownership comes responsibility. What do you think that happened to me the first time when I was a teenager and somebody slammed into my car? Rear-ended me. Self-attack all over the place, right? Because I wasn't responsible. Wasn't my fault, by the way. Isn't that interesting? It doesn't even have to be your fault. See, some of these things we justify in our minds. We just immediately jump to these conclusions that we've learned, but we haven't even done anything. Okay. These things need to be thought through. These things need to be talked through for you to be healthy and whole and heal. I think it's so important, and this is number 37, to dialogue with trusted others about growth. I think, though, it's very important for you to choose your friends. Now, look, I've got friends of all kinds. I've got friends that are clients. I've got friends that don't know a thing about my work. I've got friends that so run away from my work that they don't want to know about my work, but they accept a different part of me and love me for that. And I love them. Why isn't that all right? In other words, it just is. But I'm very lucky because right now I've got lots of friends that believe as I do, or almost as I do, one or the other. And that's a lovely thing. That way we talk about all this all the time, you know. I am very concerned when I start beginning classes, though. And I am very concerned about people that form immediate friendships or little cliques. Because if they're in the ego child's mind, guess what they're supporting? They're supporting the other egoic child's mind thoughts. And I do move into every group like that if the group is small enough. And I'll say, guys, I'm just thrilled that you all love each other. And here's what I'm hoping. I'm hoping you'll love each other even more in the future. But right now, you're supporting the wrong things in each other. We're trying to raise your vibration here, raise your energy to higher thought, and you're indulging in these old things. You know, like school boys and girls. We can't have that. We've got to get you somewhere. Okay. So it's wonderful to be able to dialogue with friends like this. I really do hope that you all are forming your groups out there, that you're talking to people about this, that you might be listening to shows like this together and then turn it off and talk, discuss. I think it's important. I think 38, we are. Where does time go? I'll tell you what, I start rolling on all this and I don't even know the time. We've got 10 minutes left. We'll try to get another one or two in. I think we need to find your emotional contradictions. Emotional contradictions are this. You've got everything in your emotional body. Everything's down there. With everything being down there, your emotional contradictions become like, I had one, a real strong one this week with somebody. Hang on. What was it? Um, oh, um, I absolutely want a life partner, and I absolutely don't want a life partner. Both existed. Um, I absolutely want to get myself to a place where I can date. I absolutely want to overwork so I don't have to ever get to that place. All of those things and much more are contained in the emotional body. My job is to go in there and find those contradictions and find the ones that are not compatible with the highest self and what you really want there, so that it's more easy to move and to make good decisions for yourself and to actually act on some of these things and get out there and, in this case, date a nice person. The emotional contradictions are not the rational part of you. They are the emotional contradictions part of you, where you feel everything, right? And we are interested in putting to rest those things that are from the ego child's mind, because you are no longer a child, so that you can think higher thought and be ready for a full and participatory life. Okay. So those things need to be looked at. I will say that a lot of those will start coming out even in the first session of you. But they certainly will come out in your intermediate work, and even once in a while in your advanced work, where we go, oh my God, you're right, I don't want it. I don't want it after all. My ego child's mind is scared to death. My highest self is reaching for that. So that's something we have to do. We have to get through it. Okay, the next one. In line with that, it's very important that you learn how to be, and this might shock you a little bit, a great partner. Right now, if you are partnerless, or even if you have a partner, don't you waste any time. You've got a lot to learn about being a partner. You don't just learn it with a partner. You learn it by dating and by self-introspection and by challenging your fantasies. Because, guys, I'm going to tell you right now, a fantasy is its own reward. You've heard me say that. And a fantasy is going to have reality come smashing against it. It invites reality to come smashing against it, because nobody should be in fantasy. Oh my God, yes, you should write fantasy. You should put it on the stage and screen. You should certainly write good books that are full of fantasy. Don't live it. If you do, you're going to be disappointed in life over and over again. The thing to do is not to say, damn, life. The thing to do is to get rid of the fantasy, to challenge it, and to find reality more intriguing and more interesting and more fun than fantasy ever was. But fantasy is the child's opiate. It's the child's mind opiate. It actually hits, fantasy actually hits the opiate centers of the brain. It is your heroin. And it's got to go. But it is as hard to break as a drug addiction. I'm going to tell you now, having broken it all my life with people, it's a very hard thing to break. I would suggest you get to work. The bad thing about fantasy, too, is that fantasy has its own fantasy, which tells you that everything's going to be right if you can just have another fantasy. If you can just keep going doing it that, you'll get what you want. Doesn't work that way. All right, moving right along. 5 minutes. You've got to develop a sense of self. If you do recognize that you go in fantasies, you throw the sense of self right out of the window if you have any to begin with. One must develop a sense of self. Um, I was trying to think of a story here, and whether or not the one that flashed through my mind would be good. Um, I will. I'll tell the story. So there were two young women, and they were both anorexic. And one of them um, had more of a sense of self. She could tell what she wanted to do in life. And I think it was acting that actually saved her at one point, because she really kind of got the bug early. The other girl had not found herself, same age, ended up in a mental institution, and had a very rough time of it for several years until she started getting into therapy. You see, acting can be many people's therapy. And I think that served this young lady for a while. And I look back on that, and not only was the there were some other things involved in this, but I think the sense of self developed late in that second young lady. I'm happy to tell you it actually did develop, but it was a much more serious and dramatic journey to health. Um, just by way of talking about the sense of self, a really good and very fundamental way of starting to deal with your sense of self is to realize that you are doing everything. Right now, I am picking up the pencil. The I of me is picking up this pen. The I of me is writing. The I of me is taking a sip of tea. The I of me is drinking the tea. The I of me is relative to that tree I see in the yard out there. Here, the perception starts here. Because a lot of people that don't have a good sense of self are seeing themselves from the audience out here. So they're not here in them. Another way that we dealt with it in acting or in business speeches is we'd got a ball that had all sorts of edges to it, and we'd bounce it and you never know where it was going, and we'd make people give their speeches or whatever, their talk or their monologue or something while they were playing ball. You have to be in your body to play ball. You have to come from here, from the essence of you, from the sense of self. That's a really good exercise if you find yourself out there looking at yourself rather than inside and having everything relative to your sense of being. Guys, I'm going to stop right there. We have 1 minute and 45 seconds. I want to say thank you so much for being with us today. We'll continue where we left off next week. And I hope you all are healthy and well, as I said earlier. I want you to be. I want you to have
90 seconds.
90 seconds. I want you to have a very nice life indeed. Let's do a prayer. Dear God, thank you so much for all of this. We now ask that we release what we can release, that we look at what we need to look at, and that we absolutely now open our being to change and growth and opportunities within. Lift us out of fantasy, dear God. Let us see that it's there and let us challenge it, that we may live in reality
seconds.
and that we may live in reality and find it most pleasing. We thank you so much for all of this. And we say this prayer in your name and in the name of the Ascended Masters, our love-centered guides and friends, and in the name of each and every person listening. Thank you. Guys, you have done great favors for me. Thank you. By getting the word out about the shows. Will you please continue to do that? We are really trying to grow our numbers, and that becomes very important for me in certain aspects of what we're trying to do around here, that we have a good showing. Would you be kind enough to, with whatever your favorite shows are, to send them around to people, to tell people that we are here and doing this work so that they may find us? That means a lot. Thank you so much. Have a great
10
week.
seconds.
Okay? God loves you through you, so let that in. All right? Take care of yourself now. Bye-bye.